The SEC will officially move to a 9-game conference schedule next year. What does it mean for non-conference rivalry games? And who will be the 3 permanent rivals for each team? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers who are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is coming up, starting this weekend. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. Breaking news coming out Thursday evening as the SEC is officially going to go to a 9-game conference schedule beginning in 2026. Each school will play 3 annual opponents focused on protecting rivalries. Ross Dellinger reporting Thursday morning that this thing was close. He said in meetings this week, SEC executives were moving closer to adopting a 9-game conference football schedule. He said a decision remained with the presidents, who were expected to meet very soon. Well, very soon was Thursday afternoon, as he went on to say momentum for a 9-game SEC schedule grew throughout the spring, coinciding with the emergence of a 4-4-2-2-1 college football playoff format. And he said it seemed to fade after coaches rejected that format. However, combined with the added money that SEC was offering and to potentially ease college football playoff talks, SEC leaders were moving more and more towards adopting that 9-game SEC slate. He said, according to previous modeling of the 9-game conference schedule, a debate the league has had for 4 years now, each SEC school would play 3 permanent opponents and 6 rotating opponents each season. I did say ACC leaders have said that they would likely follow suit, a move that would put all 4 power conferences at 9-game league schedules, and that would expedite discussions around the future college football playoff model. So you got to think the SEC was pressured here a little bit by the Big Ten, by these other conferences, by the college football playoff, saying, look, are we going to stick with 12? Or are we going to go to a 16-team playoff format down the road, whatever? We can't have any of those discussions until we know, is there somewhat of a level playing field here when it comes to conference games? So officially, the SEC announcing Thursday evening, the SEC implementing a 9-game football schedule beginning in 2026, reinforcing the SEC's position as the nation's leader in competitive excellence and fan excitement. The decision approved by the SEC's president and chancellors followed a recommendation by the league's athletic directors, was announced by Greg Sankey. And here's what Greg Sankey said in a statement. He said, adding a 9th SEC game underscores our university's commitment to delivering the most competitive football schedule in the nation. This format protects rivalries, increases competitive balance, and paired with our requirement to play an additional power opponent, ensures SEC teams are well prepared to compete and succeed in the college football playoff format. I have some questions and some reservations about that, requirement that Greg Sankey has had for years now about playing the additional power opponent, because the Big Ten doesn't have that. They don't pressure their teams to play tough non-conference opponents. And I say this all the time, Michigan 3 years ago when they played, or won the national championship, their 3 non-conference games were a freaking joke. It was like Bowling Green and ECU and whoever. Last year, Ohio State had the same thing. Ohio State went on to win a national championship. They played a joke of a non-conference slate. Give Ohio State credit. They're opening with Texas this year, start of a home and home. Great. But the reality is the SEC, I just don't think, if the other conferences aren't going to play nice and play that same way, why make it more difficult on yourself? Why play LSU going to play at Clemson? Okay, next year they're going to get a return trip from Clemson in this home and home. Why does it behoove LSU to do that with a 9-game SEC schedule? It just, there's no reason to do it because the Big Ten and some of these other conferences aren't doing it as well. Again, level playing field. If you want to make it where every Big Ten and SEC team play each other, and that's the big non-conference game, okay, great. I think that's level playing field. Both the 2 biggest conferences playing each other in a non-conference game would be awesome. And again, rotation. Some years it'll be good. Some years Alabama might get Ohio State or Michigan. Some years Alabama might get, I don't know, insert bad Big Ten team here, Purdue, whatever. But anyway, under the new format, the SEC, here's what they say. They will continue with a single standings non-divisional structure. So we're still not going to have an East versus a West. It's just wide open. They said each school will play 3 annual opponents focused on maintaining many traditional rivalries. So, we'll talk these out in a couple minutes, but obviously, Alabama-Auburn needs to be protected, the Iron Bowl. You're going to preserve some of these rivalry games. And then each team's remaining 6 games will rotate among the remaining conference schools. Do the math. We've got 16 teams. You're one of them. There's 15 other opponents. You play 3 permanent, right? So that's 15 minus 3. What is the leftover? It's 12. Play those 6 teams this year, play the other 6 teams the next year, and then rotate however they want to do it. I don't think they'll follow this model of home this way, away this year, because the next sentence in here is each team will face every other SEC program at least once every 2 years and every opponent home and away in 4 years. I like the math here. This is going to solve the problem of Texas A&M having never been to Athens, Georgia, and the things like that. Like we're going to not have to go a decade without seeing an SEC team played at an opposing stadium, and it just creates more schedule equity. We're going to see more seasons where schedules, it's an easy schedule this year, next year it's a harder draw, whatever. Now you can't escape the inequities of the permanent rivalry games, right? Like if Alabama does indeed have to keep Auburn and Tennessee, and I don't know, whoever Alabama's third would be, let's just say they give them LSU. Well, that's really tough to say every year you're playing guaranteed Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. And then on top of it, you might get a schedule that includes Texas, that includes Georgia. I mean, that's going to make it super tough. If you're Alabama in that scenario, do you really want to go play at Florida State, in a season opener? It makes the road that much tougher for you. But the SEC statement says SEC teams are required to schedule at least one additional high quality non-conference from the ACC, Big 10, or Big 12 or Notre Dame each season. And the SEC will continue to evaluate its policies to ensure the continued scheduling of high-quality non-conference opponents. Again, not all Power 4 opponents are created equal. When we see, Texas is opening with Ohio State and LSU's opening with Clemson, who did Ole Miss go play last year? Wake Forest, who I think bailed out of their home exchange with them. So, again, you can find a weak Power 4 team and it won't completely make you go out of your way to go, oh, okay. Louisville's one I've seen on a lot of people's future schedules. You'd much rather play Louisville than play at Miami or something like that. But Greg Sankey going on to say, he said the SEC has established itself as the leader in delivering the most compelling football schedule in college athletics. Fans will see traditional rivalries preserved, new matchups more frequently, and a level of competition unmatched across the nation. The SEC has played 8 conference games each season since 1992, with it expanded from 10 to 12 teams when they added Arkansas and South Carolina. And the SEC played 7 conference games per year from 1988 to 91, 6 games from 74 to 1987. So obviously, look, when conference expansion happens and schedule expansion happens, right? I mean, we haven't been playing 12 games all that long, but again, what this does set up is potential 9-game slate rotation permanents. 2 years ago, back when the 9-game schedule was discussed, the SEC office came up with 3 potential annual opponents for each school. Historic rivalries received heavy consideration, as did a formula that analyzed every team's record over the past decade and tried to create some parity. Conference never released or confirmed those opponents, but various outlets reported on those. We will get to those coming up in just a second. But Auburn AD John Cohen, I saw he put out a statement, said, playing 9 SEC games and 10 Power 4 games out of 12 obviously gives our loyal fans more SEC football to watch, but at the same time ensures that long-standing regional rivalries are maintained. I think that was the biggest fear with all this, is losing some of those rivalry games that have become so good in the conference. And, we've restored new ones, or I say brought back old ones that are new again, with Texas and A&M playing each other. That one is one we all agree. We all want to see. That's one that is awesome that the SEC was able to add. So again, you take the good, you take the bad. Not everything is going to be perfect in these changes, but when we return, like I said, we will touch on who could be those 3 permanent teams for each team. This was floated out there a couple years ago. We'll see if this is the format that the SEC opts to go with. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Hey, the first one to remind you guys, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is going to give you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even starts, this is your moment. Take a flyer in the MVP race. You want to go with Josh Allen? He's probably one of the favorites, but maybe you get some good money on a longer shot. If you're thinking maybe, I don't know, C.J. Stroud with the Texans or something like that, you could probably get some pretty good odds on that. If you want to crown your champion in August, you want to throw some money on the Bengals. Bills are very much up there. Eagles, not going to make a ton of money on that. How about the Washington Commanders? You think Jaden Daniels can elevate them? That's one you can go with. And parlay your division winner dark horses. You think that maybe Cam Ward could sneak out of nowhere and lead the Titans to an AFC South title, or maybe you're a Falcons fan. You think Michael Penix is going to take them all the way. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. That is August 26th. FanDuel, go play your game. All right, as we dive back into it, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Big question is, what is going to happen with, first, what's going to happen with the non-conference rivalry games? Again, the SEC is holding firm right now, saying we're going to stay put with requiring our teams to play a tough non-conference game, from the Power Four. Greg Sankey was on with Paul Feinbaum on Thursday saying it's important. We'll continue to look at that. He said, but there is no stronger, more rigorous schedule than playing in the SEC. We'll have a discussion if we should continue those games if others aren't doing it. Meaning, if the Big Ten is going to continue to have teams not play three tough non-conference opponents, looking at you, Indiana, then why should the SEC keep doing it, right? You're putting yourself in a disadvantage when a South Carolina goes and plays a Clemson, and maybe that's their third loss, and that knocks them out of the playoff, when Indiana played Little School for the Poor, and they get into the playoffs. So, again, a lot has to do with that. Greg Sankey also asked, would you eliminate SEC championship weekend? He wouldn't commit one way or another, but he did say, in his opinion, it's an incredible event. And he said, quote, and I think it will continue to be an incredible event, but it does take some value away. Why play an SEC championship game? Why give yourself, your second best team another loss? Again, it just hurts them going into the playoff. I get it. The appeal of winning the SEC championship, you get a first round bye. Oh, great. Didn't do Georgia much help last year, did it? So anyway, that's one thing to keep an eye on. But the other thing is, like I said, what happens to those awesome week one big non-conference matchups the SEC plays? And again, I saw some South Carolina people saying we should never play Clemson again if we want to be serious about being a playoff team. Why play that as a non-conference opponent? Let's go schedule somebody easier. So again, SEC championship, I think, is not going anywhere just because it's a lot of money that is on the line. But the other part of this is college football playoff expansion. Greg Sankey saying we would support moving to a 16-team playoff. All of those discussions are on the table. So what will a 3-team permanent rivalry situation look like? Well, this was tweeted out there. I think Pat Smith over there in with Jocks FM, he had tweeted this out. This was from a couple of years ago that folks had floated out there about what this could look like. Alabama, the one that was floated out there was Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. I think Auburn and Tennessee are locks. The Alabama-LSU game has been great for television ratings the last 15 years, obviously throughout Saban's time there and all that. So we'll see if that is one that sticks, but certainly is one that you could, adjust and go elsewhere. Arkansas, they have them Mizzou, Texas, and Ole Miss. Arkansas-Ole Miss game has been a fun one over the years. Wild, crazy things happen. And then, of course, you get, a little reuniting of the old Southwest Conference with Arkansas and Texas, and Arkansas-Mizzou, the border rivalry game there. Auburn, give them Alabama, give them Georgia. And then the third one proposed here is Vanderbilt. Again, you can take that one or leave that one. You can slide it to somebody else. But obviously, Auburn needs to be playing the Iron Bowl and needs to be playing Georgia. Florida, they've got them with Georgia, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. Again, Oklahoma, you're kind of forcing a rivalry game there. The Georgia game has to stay with Florida. With Georgia, they have them Auburn, Florida, and Kentucky. So, nice, good rivalry games there. Kentucky, they have given them Georgia, South Carolina, and Mississippi State. I've heard from several Kentucky fans saying, why are they trying to force this Mississippi State rivalry? There is no rivalry there, but it becomes a numbers game, right? If you're protecting all the other rivalry games, you got to play somebody. You got to pair Kentucky with somebody. You got to pair Mississippi State with somebody. For LSU, it has them giving them Alabama, Ole Miss, and A&M. The LSU Ole Miss rivalry goes back a long time. The LSU A&M rivalry goes back many, many years and has been a good one since they jumped back in the conference. So I like both of those. Again, the only one I go back to is, do we want to keep LSU Alabama? It's kind of unfair. I mean, it's a tough game for both sides. I know Alabama's largely owned the rivalry, but Alabama's looking at it going, yeah, we probably wouldn't shed a tear if we had to give up LSU, and LSU's probably saying the same thing. You want to give us Vandy or something like that? We'll take that one. Mississippi State would get Kentucky, Ole Miss, and A&M. Obviously, we preserve the Egg Bowl. For Missouri, you give them Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. Again, Vanderbilt's got to play somebody. Oklahoma, you give them Texas. Obviously, you preserve that one. Mizzou and Florida. For Ole Miss, you give them Mississippi State, LSU, and Arkansas. Again, we're already commented on some of these, but we're circling back around because we're hitting on the other team. South Carolina would get Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee. Texas would get Arkansas, Oklahoma, and A&M. Like I said, kind of old Southwest Conference. It just makes sense regionally to be playing Arkansas, Oklahoma, and A&M. For A&M, they would get LSU, Texas, and Mississippi State. Again, you got to give Mississippi State somebody. The Battle of the Maroons, I guess, makes sense. Tennessee would get Alabama, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. You get to keep the Tennessee-Vandy rivalry there. And then for Vanderbilt, they get Tennessee, Mizzou, and Auburn. So that was just kind of floated out there. Don't know if that's what's going to be permanent, but it makes sense, at least from a standpoint of a lot of those, probably about 70% of those, you're preserving good rivalry games and matchups. The other ones are just kind of mathematically making it work, right? Mississippi State plays Ole Miss, great. Who else do you give them? Kentucky plays whoever, Tennessee, who else? Or no, that's not even one that's on there. So again, you give Kentucky, Georgia, who else do they get? It's just, it's a numbers game. You got to make it work, and everybody only gets 3. So that's what was floated out there. We'll see what the SEC ends up deciding, but this is going to come to a head very quickly. Greg Sankey said he hopes for a December announcement date for a 2026 schedule. He said the goal is to maybe by mid-season kind of have this thing kind of figured out, and then it's just kind of a sorting of dates and weeks and, what week do you play this team and all this. But sounds like they kind of have a pretty good idea on this. Now, here's a problem. Is future non-conference games. I started looking at this. Alabama currently next year plays a non-conference slate of South Florida, Florida State, again, the return home and home, and at West Virginia. So if we're going to go to this 9-game slate, Alabama's going to get 9 conference games and at West Virginia, home for Florida State, home for USF. Do you really want to play all those games if you're Alabama? Again, I could easily see the USF game getting swapped out for, I don't know, the Citadel. I could easily see Florida State or West Virginia getting dropped here. Now, Florida State, you want to keep because it's a home and home, right? You're playing in Tallahassee this year. You want to get the return trip back to Tuscaloosa from them. But Arkansas next year in their non-conference, they play Memphis, they play Tulsa, and then they're at Utah. At Utah is their tough one. But do you maybe want to drop a Memphis and a Tulsa and add, again, Eastern Washington, or I don't know, Western Michigan or something like that. Like the Reno wins, I think, are going to be a little bit more prevalent now. For the rest of the SEC next year, a lot of them play just kind of one tough non-conferences. So I think these, at least for now, will be preserved in 2026. Auburn will get the return home trip from Baylor. Florida will play at FSU. That's their, the permanent rivalry game there, the permanent rivalry non-conference game. Georgia will play at Georgia Tech, again, permanent game, but they also will play or scheduled to play at Louisville. Kentucky gets their permanent rivalry game in Louisville. LSU will get the return home trip from Clemson. Clemson will go to other Death Valley. Mississippi State plays at Minnesota. I think that's kind of an interesting one, playing a Big Ten team on the road. Mizzou will play at Kansas, so it's a return trip. They'll host Kansas this year. Oklahoma will be at Michigan. Again, return trip from their Week 2 game this year, hosting Michigan. South Carolina plays Miami, and they've got their road trip to Clemson. Shane Beamer's looking at that going, we don't need to play Miami. We can drop Miami if we're keeping Clemson. And like I said, some South Carolina fans saying, drop Clemson, drop Miami, give us 3 rental wins like a lot of those Big Ten teams are doing. Tennessee is at Georgia Tech. Texas is home against Ohio State, return trip from this year. Texas A&M is scheduled to start a series with Arizona State. Vandy is scheduled to play NC State. How about this for Ole Miss? I know, was it Wake Forest? Somebody bailed on them on their non-conference. Ole Miss's toughest non-conference game next year is at Charlotte. Ole Miss, you have just been extended an invitation from the Big Ten because that is some Big Ten scheduling there. But anyway, I digress to say all of that is very much on the table of what's going to change for next year in terms of those non-conference schedules. The SEC says they want to still play one big Power 4 non-conference game. Okay, great. But why would you keep doing this if the majority of the SEC and the majority of the Big Ten are not, or majority ACC, majority of the Big Ten are not playing by those same rules? It's putting you at a disadvantage. It's a great moneymaker, right? Week 1 for, I don't know, LSU to play Clemson next year. It's a great moneymaker, and you're going to get a lot of dollars from TV networks to pick it all up and all that kind of stuff. That's why those non-conference, neutral site games started. The Chick-fil-A kickoff in Atlanta. We've had, there's been some in Houston over the years, Dallas. Those are great money makers, but at the end of the day, it's about getting to 9 to 10 wins and getting to the college football playoff. And again, why make it tough on yourself when you don't have to? We reiterate, Indiana played 2 ranked teams last year, both in conference, and they lost them both. But they won their 10 slappy games and they made it to the playoff. This is what the college football playoff committee is. They're looking at wins. They don't care about tough losses. Man, you had a nice tough loss. Don't care. They're not like the college basketball committee. It's the college football playoff committee. All right, more to come here on Locked On SEC. Speaking of the college football playoff, some interesting news was announced this week. We'll discuss that coming up in just a sec. Hey, but first, I want to remind you about our friends over at Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of products like Viagra or Cialis, maybe even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If the traditional options haven't worked for you, Rugiet might be the answer, with over 150,000 men having already made the switch. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Get 15% off today. That's rugiet.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, final segment here on Locked On SEC, and this was interesting news that came out earlier this week. College Football Playoff announced changes to how it will assess strength of schedule for teams. The College Football Playoff formally announcing it is changing the criteria its 13-member selection committee utilizes to assess a team's schedule strength and how teams perform against their respective schedules. Change addresses concerns about the committee devaluing strength of schedule metrics raised by many in the SEC, particularly Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina last year when they missed out on the original 12-team playoff. And here's what the release says. Changes for the upcoming season include enhancements to the tools that the selection committee uses to assess strength of schedule and how teams perform against their schedule. The current schedule strength metric has been adjusted to apply greater weight to games against strong opponents. An additional metric, record strength, has been added to the selection committee's analysis to go beyond a team's schedule strength to assess how a team performed against that schedule. This metric rewards teams defeating high-quality opponents while minimizing the penalty for losing to such a team. Conversely, these changes will provide minimal reward for defeating a lower-quality opponent while imposing a greater penalty for losing to such a team. Yes, this is one that, if you're playing, let's just pick on Ole Miss for a minute. When Ole Miss plays Wake Forest and they beat them, you shouldn't get that much of a bump for that. If you lose to them, you should be hurt significantly for losing a game like that. But this is where we talk about these tough openers happening next week. If LSU loses a close game to Clemson, don't ding them. Don't automatically write them off. And let's say they have 2 tough losses in conference, 9-3, but with marquee wins over, I don't know, let's say Alabama and South Carolina and Ole Miss. Like, those wins should matter more. I've said this for the last couple of years. We always default to who'd you lose to? Who'd you lose to? And I come back and say, who'd you beat? And that was the biggest argument with Indiana last year was Indiana. Well, they only lost to, they lost to Ohio State. They lost. It's like, but who'd you beat? If you didn't beat anybody, if you don't have a resume win on your resume, you should get dinged for that. You shouldn't be in the same conversation. So it's always the toughest part when you have a team from one conference. And again, I'm looking at outside the SEC, but you have a team that played 2 ranked opponents and went 1-1 against them. And then you have a team in the SEC that played 6 top 25 teams and went 3-3 against them. Well, we look at those 3 losses and go, you got 3 losses, you're out. What about the 3 wins? You have 3 marquee quality wins, whereas this other, team has 1 quality win. So I almost think you should look at, how college basketball does it with quads. Say this is a quad 1 win. This is a quad 2 win. This is a quad 3 win. Like, that should be valued way more in who'd you beat. And I love that the College Football Playoff Committee is going to put this into effect. Again, they're saying the metric rewards teams defeating high-quality opponents while minimizing the penalty for losing to such a team. Alabama's got to go play at Georgia this year. If they lose that game, it shouldn't knock them down 10 spots. It should be minimal. That's a tough game. 99% of the country would lose that game. Same thing week 1. If Texas loses week 1 to Ohio State, okay, it's a loss. It sucks. But it shouldn't hurt them significantly in the eyes of the playoff. That's a quality loss that 99% of the country would lose that game in the horseshoe. So earlier this spring, Greg Sankey admitted the SEC's ongoing conversation about, those scheduling models and everything that's going on there. We're going to find out very quickly here, if what the SEC is going to do about that Power 4 non-conference game if the other conferences do not follow suit and say that we're going to do the same. All this discussion has been about the SEC and the Big Ten possibly pairing up and having a joint game that they'll play each other in. We'll see if that happens. All right. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, you check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith, he's got all the latest rumors, signings, and much more. Be the most informed fan on all the changes to the college football landscape. I'm Chris Gordy. It's been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.